We seem stable now, so we'll kick off. So welcome everyone to this Q&A session for the regression pack. What I'm going to do is just go through one change that's been made to the pack since the last meeting due to an error that Fiona from Cohort B had highlighted. And then we had a number of questions that were raised on Slido in the last meeting. So I'll just go through the responses to those questions and we'll publish that out after this meeting. So that will be published by PPC. I can see that some of you are already sending in consultation comments, and that's great. Thank you for doing that. I don't intend to go through those. If you've already raised them in the consultation, we'll come back to you formally on those. So it will really be an opportunity for just anyone to raise any general queries that you've got before your formal response to the consultation. So we're recording this call, so that will be made available as well. So I'll just share my screen. Just give me a moment. Can everyone see that okay?
Yep. Yeah, we can see it, Don.
Yep, great. Okay. So just to highlight a change that has been made on slide 37, where we looked at the different options, the actual total tests numbers on options 2 and 3 were incorrect. All the other information was correct. It was just we had overcounted on those. So that will be corrected in the next version that goes out following this round of review. So just to save you raising that comment if you did pick it up as well. So just referring to the questions that were raised on the last session, then I'll just go through these one by one and then talk about the response from the programme. And if you've got any further questions, we can talk about that. So the first question was, have we considered the risk versus benefit of adding very large complex tests which took a number of sprints to complete? The example being given was 0050 TCO1. So our response to this is that the test case candidates have been selected on the basis of their value for regression. And we do acknowledge that this was a test case that was problematic for some participants when it was first executed in SIT. But since then, participants have got used to running them. So we feel that as long as participants are well prepared before they commence the test, there should be nothing. There should be no reason why the test case couldn't be achieved within the 10-day sprint period. So obviously, notwithstanding if there are defects, but that will be dealt with if that arises. The second question, is there a way that we can reduce some of the weight parameters for regression testing? And the example given was the 5-day wait periods. So on this one, we'd encourage participants to pick an SSD or EFD date that is as close to as possible to the current date. That will enable testing to complete within the stipulated timeline. If there are specific cases, though, within the pack that are causing you concern in relation to these wait periods, then if you could let us know in your consultation feedback, we'll have a look at those on a case by case and provide some guidance if we can look to speed up that process. Then there was a question about whether central parties are prepped for 2,000 MPANs being migrated into the environment in the first week. So to put this into context, participants will only be required to load as many MPANs as they require for the execution of the regression tests. That number of 2,000 MPANs, that was considered for the whole of the 400 tests that we need for settlement, the tests that we need to run in regression, and then there'll be sufficient MPANs left over for sandbox testing. So participants could migrate enough MPANs just for each test, but we would recommend that you also load additional MPANs in case of any retesting or to mitigate any other issues that you pick up during the testing. So the volumes will be low based on the number of tests that are in scope on any of the options. So we don't actually foresee any risk with the central parties either on this, because they'll be supporting this activity using processes that will be automated in their systems. And so it will be driven really largely by the supplier initiated migration process. In addition, prior to this first week of prep, there will also have been the 400 MPANs that have been migrated earlier for the settlement testing, and these can also be reused for the regression tests that are in scope. The next question was, is the test schedule being dictated by the programme or participants? So on this one, participants can manage their own schedule, but we would point out that with a 10-day window for the sprint, the program would recommend kicking off all of the tests or as close to as day one as possible. So have everything running as soon as possible within the sprint to give you a good chance to be able to complete those within that 10-day period. The next two questions related to the exit criteria and how this relates to qualification. So the programme will shortly provide details in SIT working group on the SIT completion reports and the exit choreography. But in summary, participants are going to be expected to provide a SIT participant completion report following their completion of SIT functional and migration testing, and that will be ahead of SIT regression, and we will be publishing the dates for these. And then following the regression test, we'll not ask you for another completion report, but instead we'll ask you to provide a signed pro forma that declares that you've completed all your regression testing. In the case of both of these, so the participant SIT completion report and the regression, and well, it will also cover CSS testing as well, but the declaration pro forma, these artifacts are going to be pre-populated with your test and defect outcomes by the program. So we'll do that for you. The only thing we'll be asking of you to provide in those documents is details of any exceptions or work-off plans that you will have agreed with us. And we do urge that you do agree those with us before you send the documents back to us, and that you get a signed declaration confirming your exit position from a senior stakeholder or sponsor within your organisation. So similar to readiness reports that we've asked for previously. And then these artifacts together will be required by the code bodies for your qualification. The next question really relates to the same thing, but it also talks about the evidence required, and I'll come on to that. That was a separate question in question 9. So question 7, will defect fixes have a quick turnaround? Some defects fixes have taken weeks to resolve, and given the tight timescales, this would hamper regression testing. So on this one, the program acknowledges that there is a risk here. There have been cases of defects that have taken a long time to be resolved, particularly from the central and core capability providers. It is the exception, it's not the rule. Where we look at SLA data, we do see that the majority are resolved within the SLAs. But we do acknowledge this is a risk, and we are therefore raising a risk on the RAID log. We'll be asking each of the central and core capability providers to respond to us with mitigating actions that would help avoid this situation. In the case of voluntary parties, we feel that you should all be well incentivized to provide timely resolutions to ensure that you can exit testing within the time frame. So we don't think that risk really applies to your group. But as I say, we are raising a risk on the RAID log. We will be asking those central and core capability providers to provide us with mitigating actions for that. So look out for that on the log. The question 8, so this has moved on slightly. So has a provision been made against the potential new connections test being added into option 1 to cover the DIN for the new connection migration? So for those of you that were at the Go Live implementation group on Friday, it was agreed there that we were adding 2 new connections tests, and that will be released to cohorts. We now know, having had feedback on those tests, that it's only central parties that are actually executing those tests. So we will proceed with those being executed as soon as possible, and they are in flight in 4 cohort projects at the moment. And so therefore they are hopefully going to be completed within SIT cycle 3, and they won't be included in the regression scope. And then the last question, quite a key one, is what level of test evidence is required, as this directly impacts test capacity, which obviously we're all aware of. We had raised this point with the code bodies ahead of issuing the pack, but it was still under discussion. The code bodies have now agreed that test evidence in the SIT regression cycle will not be required as long as it meets the following conditions. One is if the original test was passed during the initial SIT. Two, if the required evidence was captured as part of the initial sit. And three, if the participant asserts that the regression test was passed during regression testing. So that circles back to the fact that we're going to be asking for that declaration. So essentially, you'll run the test and then you'll declare at the end that you've passed that successfully, and that will be used and referred to against the other two conditions. But just to note, if a test case fails in regression, we'll still be expecting you to provide evidence to support the defect triage and analysis process. So that covers the questions that were raised. So at this point, I'm just going to open up to the floor then for any questions. Nigel, straight off the bat.
Straight off the bat, good afternoon, Dom. Quick one for you. The pro forma that you're going to send us out for signing, because of who and what we are, we would need to reach out to our participants for them to sign and approve that. Is there enough time scale in there for that to happen? That's
so, yeah, no, I understand what you're saying. So in terms of the SIT completion report at a participant level, there will be plenty of time for you to do that. When it comes to the regression period, we are going to want to be quite rapid on that, Nigel, really. So we can have a conversation offline, but we're sort of expecting you to come back within a week on that.
Okay.
Will be pre-populated, and I would like to think that if there are any exceptions and work-off plans, we would have already agreed those in conversation with you. So it's really just a formality of, here's what we've discussed, here's your position at the end of testing. You come back to us, and if there's any changes to that you need to make in terms of your work-off plan, all we're really looking for is the required signatures that you've completed. So what we didn't want to do was go through the administration burden of a whole new report. We don't think it's really it's going to add any value for anyone. So this is our approach to try and speed that up, but also get that final declaration from yourselves.
Yeah, it's just to alert our clients, the participants that are in SIT that we're testing on behalf of, to make them aware that this will be coming, so that they don't sort of sit on it for any period. So that's fine. Thanks, Dom.
So we are looking at the exit choreography for all groups at the moment. Obviously, we're focused on the group that are going to be coming into regression and how we'll get you through. But we are going to be coming back with details of the different swim lanes of what groups you're in and how you would get from completion of testing to qualification. So look out for that. There'll be more details coming in the next week or so. And that will be in the program plan as well. So that should hopefully enable you to warn your partners.
Thanks, Dom.
Carolyn, hi.
Hi, Dom. Would you mind going back to question 1, please?
Yeah, sure.
I didn't attend Friday, but I've got a feeling this one was ours, but if not, I support it, whoever raised it. But
sure.
So we ran this test twice, obviously, in G and in H. And on both occasions, there was a lack of direct communication and cooperation between the central parties who have to kick it off. And that was the major contributing factor to the delay. And also the distraction to us as a cohort, having to handhold every step through. Now, given it's a 200-step test, you'd expect we're all going to be kicking this off in the first minute of day 1 of 10. So I think if you're leaving it in, what we want assurance of, and I have got it ready in our response, is that there are agreed ways of working between those central parties to make sure that we can crack on with the test. I still think it's a risk leaving it in.
I understand what you're saying, Caroline, and Carolyn, sorry. We do acknowledge that is a particularly long and complex one. At this stage, what we're trying to do is sort of agree the scope. That's probably step 1. But once we have got to that position, it's my intention that we'll get together with the central parties and yourselves to work out exactly how we're going to work in these sprint periods. It's going to be a different approach to what we've taken, where different cohorts are running different tests at different times. Everyone's going to be running the same set of tests, so we're going to want to make sure that we've got every single supporting organisation lined up and ready to do things when we need them done at rapid pace. So I think what we'll do is let's get to the point where we've got agreement on the scope, and then we'll set up another session where we look at how we're going to organise that and make sure that we don't waste any of that 10-day period, and that will involve this is what we're expecting of the central parties for each given test, and for them to assure us that they've got the necessary capacity there to be able to support that quickly.
Well, I think it's also getting learnings from the functional test to improve and make efficiencies so people are already in advance. And this would be a classic example of that list. And I'd be happy to give you our personal experience, because it said happened in both G and then again in H. It wasn't a one-off. And my second question,
I think it's a good shout. Just on that one, though, Carolyn, so that we do get those learnings. I think we should have a session where we draw those out for each test. Let's go through each test and talk about what people's experiences were on them, what worked well, what didn't work well, and then build that into our approach.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
And then meter technical details. It's my hope that the programme are providing the data for meter technical details for regression testing, but I haven't seen that documented anywhere.
Okay,
it's ringing on the metering service to provide that data services.
Yeah, hi Carolyn. Yeah, it's John.
Hi, John.
Yeah, we'll provide, just like we've done for NFR testing. What we're doing, just to sort of give people a extra level of assurance as well, is we're using exactly the same MPANs and exactly the same data that we've created for NFR testing. We're going to be using that for regression testing. So all we'll be doing is, in effect, we've loaded the MPANs into SIP-B for NFR. We're then going to provide the exact same set of MPANs to load into SIS-A or regression testing. Obviously, they'll be in a different state. People will be loading them in a legacy state rather than an MHHS state, but it'll be the same MPANs with the same meter technical details.
Okay, so you're providing them, so we shouldn't get requests for data services, intermetering services during the regression test period.
Yeah, that's correct. Because what we're doing is we're providing. Obviously, we're not providing meter technical details for smart meters, because obviously they don't exist in the future. But for all traditional and advanced meters, the data service, the metering service, and the supplier will all be given their own matching set of MTDs to load.
Okay, that's great. Thanks, John. Thanks, Dom.
Thanks, Karen. Okay, I don't see any other hands up. Anything that crops up, though, please put it in your consultation response, and we will provide a response to you on that. So yeah, we look forward to receiving those remaining responses, and we can probably cut off there. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Dom. Thank you.